Hello, everyone. Good evening to all of you who has tuned into yet another TiE University Focus session. Powered by Rack Bank, we are here to share with you some inspiration where our fireside speaker for today, Rishav, was a student from the UAE not too long back and is now tuning in from the Bay Area in California where it's pretty early in the morning for him. 5 a.m. for you, Rishav? And all thanks to a hackathon he won in the UAE a few years back. On behalf of TiE Dubai, welcome, welcome, welcome. Being conscious of time, I will keep my part short and sweet, but I do want to talk a little bit about TiE, in case anyone in the audience may be new here and does not know much about TiE. In a nutshell, TiE is an organization that fosters entrepreneurship globally. What started as a conversation, a small gathering in Silicon Valley in 1992, has now turned into more than 60 chapters in 15 countries. So how TiE functions is on 5 main pillars, namely mentoring, networking, education, funding, and incubation. While TiE has a global reach, we make sure each chapter gets to focus on the local ecosystem. There are some great programs which we run for all the entrepreneurs here in the UAE. And due to the pandemic, we've been able to expand the reach to the MENA region, in fact. The mentorship program, the TiE Women program, the TiE University program for the university's students, which I will talk a little bit more about it today. We have launched a TiE University MENA program for 2022 earlier in January, and we have received over 80 applications from over 25 universities. We are now in the process of evaluating them and will announce shortly on the top finalists for the MENA region. The MENA winners, including runners-up, get a cash of 30,000 dirhams, will also get to fly to Silicon Valley to compete on the global platform with multiple student teams from over 23 different countries. The global finale winner will get a total prize of 100,000, with the winner taking home $50,000 in cash, all equity free. Along with this, there are amazing prizes, and also what I would really recommend as high value is the one-to-one mentorship that you get. So including for our top 10 finalists, we will be having a mentor working very closely with you who are seasoned, accomplished entrepreneurs, who are our charter members, who will work with you to refine and get better at your pitch. TiE Dubai is the Middle East chapter of TiE based in the Dubai Internet City and has been around for more than 18 years now, more than 19 years now. The easiest way to be a part of this community and get to know all about our events and programs is by liking us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to access all our events and programs. You can just look for TiE Dubai everywhere. And I want to give a special shout out to all the charter members who form the backbone of TiE who are in the audience now. Moving on to the session for today, I'm more than pleased to introduce our moderator for today, Reem. Someone who is focused, driven, and passionate. We wanted someone young and who is going through what Rishav went through some years back on his journey to be the one picking his brains and driving the session for today. Reem Almosabbeh is the youngest female Emirati tech entrepreneur, a startup mentor and speaker who was recently featured in the Entrepreneur Middle East. She's the founder of a tech firm called Retech, the co-founder of Unipreneur, an entrepreneurship, intrapreneurship, and leadership development platform for students, and is also a member of the Dubai Youth Council and SDGs Council. Through her work with Dubai Youth Council and other government entities, she is involved in running various youth entrepreneurship and startup development initiatives like GITEX, UTEX Unipreneur, the Young Falcons, Dubai Metavator Challenge, the UAE Hackathon, and many more. She's passionate about working with the youth and connecting them with the government industry ecosystem to create successful tech entrepreneurs, global change makers, and future leaders. She was featured as one of the women to watch out for by GITEX last year, and it is not without reason. Without further ado, Reem, I leave it to you.
Thank you, Cicely, for the introduction. And thank you so much, everyone from the audience, for investing your time and being with us today. So, as mentioned, my name is Reem Almosabbeh, and I'll be your moderator today in this interesting Fireside Chat, the journey from an A student entrepreneur to a Cisco acquisition, hearing the startup Cisco from Rishav, how big and how hard they have worked to reach the state they are in today. So today, I'll wrap up and an engineer manager at Cisco. Hi, Rishabh. I hope you're doing well.
Here, thanks. Yep, nice to be here and present with all the audience.
So you started in a hackathon in UAE, and now you are working with the innovation department in Cisco after your startup got acquired. Can you tell us more about your journey and your startup?
Sure. So as in chronologically, it all started, as you mentioned, at a hackathon in 2015. So it was an angel hackathon at the Microsoft office in Dubai. And yeah, like we just like participated in the hackathon. We created a team there and we created something at the end of the hackathon, which actually people liked. And we felt like, hey, we might be onto something big. And from then onwards, we have been kept going. And yeah, like we created a company after that. And just in the summary, we raised some money from locally in the Middle East and from some investors outside. So that was a great learning experience for us and like a lot of support and learnings we had from the community. And then we were later acquired by another startup in the area called Voicea, which then we both later got acquired by Cisco. And yeah, over the period, like a lot of learnings, touched by a lot of different people, and like yeah, a lot of support from the community we had. And yeah, it's like a lot more things in the last like 7 years in the journey.
Interesting. So I've heard like in this than a year from academia to winning a hackathon and building your own startup and traveling, let's say, to the holy land of Silicon Valley and then winning the Angel Hack Global Demo Day. And can you tell us just more about the wrap-up startup? So it uses, from what I know, artificial intelligence to auto-summarize meetings, and it has been acquired by the tech firm Voicea. What does the application itself or the platform in general help the users in terms of meetings and personalization of the whole thing?
Okay, so that was more and transcribe it in real time. And it will also then try to find all the important moments which were said in the meeting, or you can also manually trigger them. And so that it makes it much more easier for you to create minutes of the meeting, because we realized that was a big pain point people often go with. They're in so many different meetings, and like either they're spending countless nights, especially consultants and everyone after the entire workday, trying to write the notes and sending out the minutes of the meeting, or people in the meeting just end up not listening and just writing notes. And so we felt like that is a big problem and which we tried to solve, and that was the thing. So
I totally agree. Like I cannot relate enough, especially now people have too many meetings, and it's a growing concern in terms of multitasking. And sometimes you're double booked and you have to leave. So I believe it's a great idea to help people in terms of organizing their life. And moving on, your tech is integrated with WebEx. And if you started from scratch to having over 1 million of users, from a hackathon to working in a big company, how long it took you to find and reach the stage of success?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. What you've said is true. Like, yeah, when we started out of a hackathon, we started like trying to get our friends and families to use it, and from that to now it being integrated into WebEx too, which is used by hundreds of millions of users. For us, like as in over the acquisitions and stuff, like we grew from hundreds to thousands to 10,000s, and then to the WebEx scale. Like just to put it in a chronological order, we got acquired by Cisco in 2019, September. And so we launched the product early 2020, and towards the end of 2020, it was available to more than millions of people. So yeah, in less than 5 years, or roughly around 5 years, it was an amazing journey to scale it from one user or a few users to 1 to million users.
That's amazing, and especially this is a very inspiring story, because successful businesses or startups in general, they don't have linear trajectories. Entrepreneurship can be a very long process, so you need to have patience, you know. And I've seen many startups, many ventures with those initial setbacks and challenges and unexpected deviations, flexible and find opportunities. Don't you agree, Rishav?
Definitely, and we did have those challenges as well, and we did have to maneuver and adapt, and like, because we were learning as we started, because it was the first time all of us were also trying to solve the problem. And when you actually try to solve, you have so much more learnings. You talk with people, what works, what doesn't work, and a lot of times, because also like you ask your customers or users what they want, and a lot of times they might not be able to convey what they really want, and you have to figure it out yourself what actually they need. And that's when you're actually solving the problem and making something which gets used a lot.
Yes, and speaking of which, learning what an entrepreneur would have done differently can help us make, you know, smart choices in our life, and especially in taking our venture to the next level. So knowing what you know right now, is there anything you would have done differently when you were out?
Definitely, I think so. Like a lot of things we learned, like there were some things which we could have done better. I think so. One of the things which I definitely feel like which entrepreneurs need to do a lot of times better, which they might hesitate from, is being open to asking for help and getting support and reaching out to mentors. Because a lot of times we feel like, hey, if we ask for help or things like that, people might not think of us as great, or if you don't know. But a lot of times that's like, not sorry, a lot, that's the case. People appreciate it when you don't know and you honestly ask, or you're trying to reach out and learn from them, and use that to enhance your experience. You would be definitely one of the learnings. I'll be like, okay, look, if we're starting again, that will be a new thing.
Correct. So speaking of my journey, I've been through various incubation programs, and I cannot emphasize enough on the importance of having a mentor in your life. You know, trying to incorporate this value of having a mentor, a supportive community, you know, into your early stages, especially to help you and guide you throughout the process. And moving on, you know, translating your personal values, your vision, your expectations, and the time it takes to reach the level of being an expert in this field. How did you establish your startup culture and found the right team members or co-founders, let's say?
So firstly, like addressing the latter part of the question, it is not a very usual answer which people get from us on how we found the team members. So we were a startup. We actually, like, I went to the hackathon along like the other people. We didn't go to the hackathon as a team. We went there, people were brainstorming ideas, just talking with each other. Like us, we had met like in different events before or something like that, and just like, okay, knew from face or name. And we actually created a team at the moment at Hackathon based on like, hey, what the skill set each person has, and can they complement each other, and things like that. And like, for example, when I went in, I didn't have an idea, and my co-founder, like Rami, had the idea of something similar, and he actually came up, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then Ayush was also with me, who was my other co-founder, and actually someone from my university. And like, we actually, when we started in the hackathon, we were more people than what we ended up in the company. But it's just like we created a team at the hackathon and we started with that. But then once we started to taking it seriously, not everyone had a similar time commitment, and some people didn't want to take it further. And it's just from there, the people who actually wanted to continue and depend from there. So that was a more of like being open, meeting people, understanding, and being able to create team. And then teams change over time, and that's the way we ended up. Like I ended up with my two amazing co-founders. Yeah, so that's more about like how we ended up as a co-founders. And especially when you're a first-time entrepreneurs, culture is something which takes time to build, because as co-founders itself, like if you're working together for the first time, you're figuring out what works, what doesn't work, and how you gel together, because you're building trust and all the other aspects. And I think so that's something which just takes time. But the only thing like which people try to do, which I've seen works well, is in the startup culture is try to promote like honesty, culture, growth, because at the end of the day, every person in the startup, co-founders, founding people, and everyone, they try to work towards the end goal, which is making the startup successful and not focus on any individual's growth. And that's when like any startup goes from a normal business to trying to become like a big venture and things like that, because everyone is then collectively only thinking about making the startup successful, keeping the egos aside and just working on the vision.
That's interesting. And there is one thing also I've read that you cannot, everyone has their own journey, so you cannot compare yourself to other startups. And not all challenges are negative, as we know. So learning from early obstacles can help you grow your business and also refocus your efforts and teach you important skills in the area of taking your startup house. We can cover from finding the right team members to developing your beta version, MVP, commercializing the version itself. So how did you overcome those challenges in the beginning of your journey?
Okay. So yeah. So talking about like I agree and with the points you mentioned, like, but yeah, overcoming like building. So I think so. One of the things which we eventually realized was we luckily had a lot of good mentors, and they pushed us in the right direction. Like, hey, what's works and like how we should make progress. And we realized the faster we build something, we get things out of in front of the people, the earlier we collect feedback, the faster we move, rather than us spending months or years like within like in an isolation and trying to work on something which we never know if people will like or not, and just going with that assumptions. So we luckily had a very great team of mentors who would help us review what we have been working on, and then also connect us with people like who can try and brainstorm with us. And that just helped us a lot in early testing, validation of the idea, and the MVP. Luckily in the team also we had these skill sets required to build a minimum product, and which like then we focused on and just tried to get something out which people can use and give the feedback on. And because a lot of times MVP doesn't need to be something which is very fancy end-to-end or things like that. It just should be able to have the use case like shared. So for example, they say an MVP is a very open definition. For a coffee machine, it can be even like two people standing behind a curtain, and you say you want a black coffee, they pour you a black coffee, versus if you want a tea. And it just like shows you what the use case is, where okay, you ask for something and it just comes from behind. So a lot of MVPs can be very widely open, and you have to just make sure you get something out that people get a sense of the use case and the problem you're trying to solve. And if that's actually a problem which you're solving, because a lot of times we might be trying to solve something which is not a problem, and then we might be like, hey, then people might not actually need it, and then we might have to pivot.
Correct. And I've learned it actually the hard way. So how do you define an MVP? I remember when I first started my application, we had to develop an MVP. But back then, I did not understand fully, comprehend the full aspects of an MVP, and you need to test it and iterate and come back. So we were very keen to develop a perfect product, which wasted a lot of time. When we tested it in the market, it turned out people wanted something else. We weren't actually solving a real problem. So what is your advice to tech entrepreneurs, especially when it comes to developing an MVP? whole life.
Very open-ended. Like, for example, I remember for Dropbox, the MVP was more of a presentation, and for some companies, it's a full end-to-end product which they do. But I think so. It's like you start with somewhere with the idea, you present the problem, and then you start working on some skeletons, because sometimes people might be just working on user flows, then designs, then implementing some basic versions which might not look great. And because for us, like when we started, we didn't have designers. We were designing Rami was designing our designs in PowerPoint because he was a consultant. So we pick up things from just like whatever you know good, and you just start working on those. But the thing which we realized was, in all of these stages, work with someone who you feel like might be a user or someone who has knowledge in this field, so that you're also validating what you're working on, getting feedback early rather than waiting till the end to collect their feedback. Because a lot of times you might just, like as you said, like wait till the end and then you realize, okay, these were the flaws, or these might not work because people are not doing this. Because as the things evolve, people get a better idea, and you get feedback and you can pivot early, because it's all about getting early feedback, pivoting, and adapting yourself to the changes. And that helps us, like anyone, to build a much better MVP when they have a lot of these feedback and touch points, which, as they say, like when you're building a product, it's a lot of times so that you pick a test user and work with them and work on the product.
But what have been your most significant failures in your journey, and what did you learn from them?
Okay, so in terms of failures, we do all have those, which we usually a lot of times might not promote, but it's one of the most important things which we learn from. So in our case, I'll be, okay, I think so. We started with something, and like we started with the mobile app, then we went on the web app, then we were also trying to address conference providers. And like one of the things I think so was, when you start doing a lot of things, but you're still limited bandwidth and you're early, you lose focus, and none of the products might be of that great quality, because then you're just like trying to do too many things at once. And if you don't have the right focus or things leading on each side, then you might be just doing a subpar work at all of those. And that is when we realize, hey, we are not making progress or things like that. We are moving in all directions, but none of them is actually working great because we're not focused on it. We're just trying one size fits all and just trying to address everything. And then we realize we have to pick a vertical or pick a use case and try to go after it, get it perfect or get it right in some way, otherwise fail in it, learn, and then try another use case, rather than trying all of them at once. And we did have those challenges, and we used to be like, hey, should we shut down the mobile app and just switch to web or things like that? And then that's the time when we said, okay, let's just focus on the mobile app, go with that use case completely. We got that right, and then go ahead and try the other platforms.
That's interesting, because I've been through the same challenge as running an application, and also my other website, is that whenever we speak to a mentor, or let's say a certain entity, there is always different opinions, there is always different feedback, and it builds the noise in your head. It's like, I don't know now, it's diverting you from your goal and your vision. So you start building something and coming up with a different product, totally different from how you started and how you set it, a vision. So all of those noises, what is your advice to early stage entrepreneurs and people who are interested to become an entrepreneur, is to eliminate those noises and focus on their goal?
Okay, I completely agree, and that was a problem we also suffered with. And as you mentioned, you went through, and everyone who starts suffers when they ask for help, and because a lot, like every mentor is different, they have different experiences, and mentors are correct in their way because they're coming from their experiences, and their feedback is valuable. It's just like they have different perspectives, they've been in different industries or companies, and different things work for everyone. And I think so. It's what you said is very correct. So one of the things is like, yeah, don't try to mix a lot of feedbacks from all the mentors, and then you just have some Frankenstein build. You have to focus. Okay, like if you're following a mentor, then you have to make sure that you trust that mentor and you feel like the mentor is leading you in the right path. So you have to like, hey, who are you following? And then go with their feedback and things like that, but not close your ears to other. Be always open to the feedback, but always make sure that, hey, are you going that same direction that you started? Because a lot of times we have to come back, like set checkpoints. Yeah, I started moving this direction, and with all the learnings and feedback with this mentor and things like that, we want to build a product which is X and it solves these use cases. But then when we hear feedback from other mentors and things like that, we do take those and see, hey, is this making me from this path to something we continue the same path? Then it helps, like, okay, we take out maybe when we can address it or we try to see. So I think so that's one of the main things is like focusing on one path, one mentor, but then keeping yourself open and then just following it till the time which you have checkpoints. And if things don't work, then people switch and they try and pivot, but follow one direction at a time.
I totally agree. And speaking of which, also I've been getting a lot of questions. Is that whenever I sit with an entrepreneur, they're like, we met the startup and they're a competitor. So what is your thoughts on competition itself? There is many startups I know, many amazing and inspiring people who tend to give up on their ideas just because there is a big boy or a competitor in this field, the red ocean, let's say, and they would not continue further in the progress of their startup.
Okay, so I think so that is true, and considering like the technology in the world has been around for so long, like people have tried different things like multiple times, and there'll be competitions and things like that. But I think so, like whenever you look at a use case or some industry, you have to see like, hey, but there is a competition, but it's not that they're able to address 100% of the market. If they're not able to, that means they're not doing everything right. Because I believe in any startup, more than the idea or the business, what matters is like execution, how people are trying to solve it, and all the steps which you take, because that's what makes every entrepreneur different and every startup different. Like there are so many different companies which might be doing the same thing, but all of them are just able to only address a small percentage of the market, which means that they're still unable to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And then you also work on something which might make you different. But I think so one of the things which helps when you're trying to enter a market which is already having other startups is try to find something which makes you different from them, and what is the advantage a user has of using you compared to any other product. Because the biggest example is the conference provider we're using right now. Like Zoom is also a very big competition. Like it was started by people who used to, for example, work in WebEx, and they already knew like it was a very big conference provider, but they knew there were a lot of different gaps there, which they were able to then address by building a competing product, which they knew the other providers were not able to. And they focused on that use cases, went deep, and tried to address all of those issues. And that just made Zoom, like everyone now knows Zoom and how big of a success it is. So it's always that we have competitions. It's just you have to focus on what can make us different and go from there.
I totally agree. The competition is healthy in some aspect, and I would like also, to highlight the beautiful part of being an entrepreneur. While it's important to prepare for obstacles and consider all those setbacks and challenges, but also the joy in your team members. Entrepreneurship itself, for me, gave me two families: my own family and my team, who became my family throughout the ups and downs that we went together, and the motivation. So what have you enjoyed most about starting your own company and reaching to this level?
Yeah, and like completely agree. And as you mentioned, that's a very right way to look at it. And it's like a second family which you have and you learn. So I think so it's been similar for me. It's been the joy of working with people who are driven, working towards the same thing and trying to create a difference. Because I was lucky to have the co-founders like Rami and Ayush who were with me, because also learning from them. And and after that, like we had so many more people in the team, which I'm still working with, and all of them are still with us, like at Cisco, and that just becomes a family. And like all of you working together towards the same goal, so many different challenges. And I think so one of the things because of that which made me do is now I'm always looking for challenges whenever I'm working on a problem or things like that also, because when you start being an entrepreneur and things like that, you're solving real life challenges and things like that, and your mind just gets trained with that, and you're like, hey, you're looking for the next challenge which you can solve and create an impact. So that piece of being able to address challenges and create a much bigger impact in the world, or like affect so many different people's lives. So one of the things, for example, being having millions of users or things like that now is whenever I make a small change, and if we push it out and we make a good change, that can impact hundreds of millions of people's lives, and like how they use their product, our product, or just things in general. For example, we added something which allows people to translate in real time. So for example, if I'm speaking in English, but someone is having difficulty following, they can translate it in Arabic in the UI itself. A product more accessible across the market, and it's just like so many more people are now able to use it and follow better in the meetings and things like that. So that's the joy of solving problems and making lives easier for people and working with awesome people.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Especially that, knowing that you're an entrepreneur, you have a purpose, and you're creating an impact, a ripple effect that will result in a huge impact in future, and will help to change people's life. In addition, I always get asked this question, especially being a serial entrepreneur, juggling between academia, my startup, and sometimes I do part-time job. So tell me more about your daily habits as an entrepreneur. How do you balance between your personal, professional life, your team members, and so on?
Okay, so this is something which I was not good at earlier. Time management is something which most entrepreneurs struggle with, and I was terrible at it. I'm getting better. So one of the things I look at it is, yeah, you need to find a balance. Being an entrepreneur, I used to work like most of the time, it's good, but like we need to make, because one of the things which happens with being an entrepreneur, I'm not like, you might have felt it also, like when you're focused too much on our work, that also does isolate us from all the social circles oftentimes, because we are a lot more spending efforts and working on things beyond normal hours. And it might, a lot of times the journey of entrepreneurship might seem lonely. So that's why it's required to have people who support you and people like you can connect with and speak with at any point. And it's very much required. That's why I have a balance. So that's why one of the things I had read recently is like someone had posted that they consider that they only have 23 hours in a day. They spend 1 hour to always focusing on their life, fitness, and all of those things, and the remaining 23 hours for work and everything else. So I think so working hard and spending the maximum time is required, but at the same time we need a balance, because if we don't have that balance and support of our peers, family, or friends, then that also like it impacts like, hey, how far can we go along? Because the journey of entrepreneurship can be tough. So we need people who can support us, cheer us, and just keep us motivated.
So, correct. I till now struggle with the balancing. Sometimes during weekends I sit with my mom, and she's always like, "You're always busy. We don't see you. You don't sit with us." So it's very hard, to explain to them, especially your parents, that it's not easy. Entrepreneurship is not about running a startup; it's a lifestyle. So it literally incorporates in every aspect in your life, and you need to deal with it, and you need to be an expert in time management, organizing at the same time, not forgetting yourself and treating yourself, and just getting a relief from a certain time to time. So I was reading also one of the press releases, and I've seen that you're also working on a new thing with Cisco. Can you tell us more about that?
Okay, sure, yeah. We also, as I said, like we try to address, like once an entrepreneur, always stays an entrepreneur. So now being at a Cisco, which is a bigger corporate also, we still had the entrepreneurship within us. So we were lucky that we were like because of our previous success and things like that, we got a chance to work on another new innovative idea. And within Cisco itself, as a new product, which we are trying to work as a startup in a corporate called Vidcast. And there we are trying to solve another problem which we are seeing. Like, as you mentioned, you're in a lot of meetings, and like I'm also in a lot of meetings, and my meetings are with people all across the board, like in Eastern Europe, London, India, China. It's just because, like, for example, I work with Cisco and we have teams in every part of the world. And it takes time, for example, nowadays, even for a small meeting or a communication, for the calendars to align, because, okay, I can only connect with the China in my Bay Area evenings or India with my mornings. And so we're trying to address that problem by replacing and seeing like, hey, how can we do something to meetings which Slack, WebEx messaging, or other chat apps did to emails. Like earlier, it used to take a lot of time to write emails and a lot of formal communications. But then Slack and things like this made it a lot more easier to communicate at any time you have a short message, you send it. So similarly, we are trying to create an asynchronous messaging platform for video messages. So if you want to send a message across, like directly, like, hey, a message out to your team, or like if you're working in sales, a quick demo. If you're working in engineering, like, hey, this is a bug, with your screen share, your camera, and things like that. So, which allows the people to quickly record it and share it, and then asynchronously get feedback. So you don't have to wait for both the calendars to align. You send the content on your time, and the other person watches when they are available. And this just unblocks the entire process. And so that's something which we've been exciting and we've been working on for the past year. And it's been an exciting journey to do a startup now within a corporate. A complete different experience in itself.
That's very exciting. That's very exciting, and I cannot wait to try the solution once it's launched. Especially, it accelerates, the collaboration and the speed in which knowledge is communicated between people itself. And now the rise of the concept of the metaverse and the collaboration and so on. So the social aspect it's bringing the social aspect very close as possible to digitalization itself. Since now it's 5:40 almost, and we're getting close to our time, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to be an entrepreneur or is in early stages in their venture?
My thing would be, especially for students and things like that, like it's so life. And like, if you want to try something, try it now. And because, as they say, you miss the shots you don't take. Like, now is the best moment at the start of the career. Try as many things as you want. Like, fail, learn, and learning is an important thing. And try something else. Ask for help. Ask for mentorship, and just go along with it. And there's so much help out there in the community because people have done it so much more like successfully, and like there's so much more mentors available. And I was very lucky to get a lot of good mentors and help from them. So just utilize all the mentoring which you can get, and take risks and give it a try, because especially being a student entrepreneur, like there's very less to lose and a lot more to gain. And even if it doesn't become a startup or things like that, you learn so many different skills, not just technical or business, but life skills, how to build something, how to work with people. And so that's invaluable, which you get. So that will be my suggestion. Give it a try. If you have an idea, go meet with people, share it, get feedback, and get going.
And most importantly, don't be afraid to take risks. This is what entrepreneurship is all about.
Definitely.
Yes. So now let's go to the audience for questions. We would like to address as much questions as you guys have. So feel free to write it in the chat, or you can raise your hands and we're gonna unmute the mic for you guys to speak. Just let me check the chat. I believe we have some questions. So Rishav, we have one question from Salma. What do you think about working on your project and developing it slowly rather than selling it partially or entirely, and then letting it to grow and scale up through VCs?
So, okay, and developing it slowly. I believe like it's never wrong. Like if you have some idea, you're spending some time on it slowly and things like that. and let it grow. But one of the things which a lot of times might happen is we might let it go slow forever or for a very long time, and then we feel like, hey, we missed the boat. So whenever you do this and try to do something on the side or take it slow, do set checkpoints that, hey, like if things work well within the slow and I feel confident about what I'm doing in 3 months time, then switch or try something else. Like, because it's completely fine. A lot of people do that, and a lot of businesses are treated like that. But one of the things have to be always like you create checkpoints in your life. Like, hey, like at this point, like as how people say, like they create diaries and things on how they can reflect. So similarly with this, when you create checkpoints, you can reflect back on like, hey, what you did, and are you hitting what you had? And if you need to change your checkpoint, change it. But it is definitely like doable and people do that, and but yeah, do it with checkpoints. And I think so you can also probably add, because I think so you must have also come across a lot of people who must have had similar experiences or similar questions.
Right, and I believe you have answered it perfectly. I hope Salma he answered the question. Want to is the best
validations. But yeah, being through it once, I would say like we luckily did it in a good time. So ideally, you want to do raise funds when you feel confident with the product and like you feel you have an unfair advantage or something which separates you from the others, or you're working on a good track. Because when you go to investors or things like that, you also want to show something which makes you look valuable rather than just something like, hey, we still have an idea or things like that. Because a lot of times, so usually what I've seen, like investors do invest in ideas also, but then usually they require something more, which is like, hey, if you've been a serial entrepreneur previously and have had success records. But for in our case, we all were first time entrepreneurs. So we some machine funding conversation much more easier. So that will be something which I'll advise is when you have something tangible and which people can touch or feel or get value out of it and makes you all different. That will be the thing. But it doesn't mean to not be in touch with investors early. You can always consider investors also as people you reach out to for feedback and just running questions through them and getting ideas.
I agree, and I believe also it depends on the stage of the startup. Like in my case, we did not have to raise any funds. We bootstrapped throughout to develop our solution until we reached a stage that we were able to make traction, and we needed a lot of expansion and improvement. Here, we tend to reach out to VCs to raise funds or bootstrap. It depends on what is required and how is our model.
Completely agree. Like, for example, I know a company which is worth more than $1 billion. They never raised money, and they're raising money now because they managed to do it slowly for over 30 years. But now they feel like they need to take it like a unicorn.
Correct.
Also. So, as you said, is very correct. It depends on the team and the company.
Now we have another interesting question also. I believe if I can just remodel the question, if you have a low quality MVP, so how do you retain the customer loyalty itself in terms of launching the MVP, I think, and testing?
Okay. I think so. So one of the things which you want to be careful is you want to choose your customers for MVP very carefully, because you want people who you trust, and you know that even if they had a few bad experiences, they wouldn't go away from you. So that's why they say, like, for MVPs, try to get people like you can trust. If you don't, then like they say, like if you 100 users. So then you have to very carefully, as they say, spend your users, or like when you feel like test it on a few users, learn from it, and you might not be able to retain everyone, but then slowly use that user base. So that's why if you see most of the companies, they do a public beta, but before the public beta, they do a closed beta where they take all the waitlist of users, but they only release it slowly as a product they feel more confident in. And even big companies like Bose and others do this for their products.
Interesting. And we have also another question, a couple of questions in the Q&A. One of them is, how did entering a student entrepreneurship competition benefit you? And when you were in the global finals, how did it benefit you in general?
Okay, so I think so, yeah. So I had luckily got the opportunity to present in the student entrepreneurship competition by EO, the GSEA competition in Dubai, and luckily, like we won the Dubai chapter and participated in the global finals in Frankfurt. And I think so. One of the things was I used to a lot of times underestimate, like, hey, what are the other students doing and things like that. But it was an eye-opener experience for me just to see what are the other people going through and things which they are working on. And I actually was surprised to see, like, also one of the things you realize when you're talking to more entrepreneurs, especially student entrepreneurs, have a more different journey than regular entrepreneurs, maybe because they're at the start of their journey, they don't have a lot of validations. And you see like students, entrepreneurs from different parts of the world, like when I met from Brazil, like Nepal, India, they all having similar stories, similar struggles, trying to prove their validation, create trust in vendors in the market and things like that. And like, meet a lot of like-minded people. Like I'm still in touch with some of the people I met in the global finals. I had actually met someone like in Bay Area, like some time ago also, which I had connected through that event, who was also a participant. So that's the other thing which you get is like a very good network of people. And third thing, which any organization which is organizing these is usually the ones which have the best entrepreneurs themselves. So you get an access to amazing entrepreneurs who help you, like they advise you also, and they promote you, they give you a good platform. So it's definitely one of the best experiences a student entrepreneur can get.
I totally agree with you. Also, my startup, we won the GSEA chapter in UAE, and I always advise entrepreneurs and students to enter those competitions, to reach out to conferences, because networking is your net worth. So regardless if your product wins, if you make it halfway, but your network and the people that you met will be the actual asset later on. Moving on to another question. Is starting an NGO as a startup a good idea, or should I always go with a proper profitable business?
That's an interesting one. It's, I think so, what one is passionate about. If you can combine the two, like as in like you can in some ways help the NGO also, that's always better. But yeah, I think so if you care about the NGO, then that's definitely a good thing to do. And like it's a, like definitely people like to do. A lot of times what people might do is they might try to do something profitable just so that it makes things comfortable for them, and then they can invest a lot more time and effort in NGO where the earnings or the money back might not be as lucrative, but they have other sources of income or the previous companies which they built. So a lot of times, as they say, like if you're passionate about those opportunities, but then we do other things to pay for that piece, or even
At the end, it all
different
depends on
things.
the passion. Another interesting question: how do you convince experienced developers with good pay to join your team?
How do you convince? Okay, I think so. One of the things is they need to believe in you. That's one of the things, like especially as entrepreneurs, because whenever you're trying to find some great, because as they say, like you always try to hire the best people, and like those people need to come and believe in your business and like the leadership which is in the startup. And considering a student being an entrepreneur, which you must have also seen, like a 16-year-old kid or 18-year-old kid saying he's starting a company. A lot of times people used to think about like, hey, is it safe or not? But then you have to speak, build a relationship with them and have them trust you and show them your sides, show them what you're good at, show them what you're not good at. And once they trust you, then that creates a bridge. The other thing also, which people who have good pay and things like that, like with the market becoming a lot more mature, they've understood the value of equity and things like that. So most of the startups which have started and things like that, they attract a top tech talent once they feel confident in your startup is through providing them equity shares in your company, because then they have a lot more interest than just salary. Because if they get like even like a small equity, like a 0.5%, 1% or anything, that can grow to like a massive amount in the future. And people are seeing that those bets pay off good. And it's all about because the efforts which they also put in the company. So they'll always be like, it's no more just a job. They have shares in the company and they're working towards that. And everyone is then trying to make the company the most valuable thing in the world.
Correct. And in addition to this, like when we tried to hire interns in our company, as you know, the market is very competitive in terms of finding good developers. So we always wanted to give back. It wasn't just through equity. It was also providing them with self-development, free conference tickets, events, and so on. So this was a really good attraction for them to come and join and for a period of time. In addition, learn and develop themselves.
Agree. And like one of the things just to add over there, which you mentioned is like apart from the pay and everything, it matters a lot, like the culture you create. So for example, as you had said, like you have provided them so many different opportunities, because considering the amount of time you spend at work every day, like it's massive, more than like any time we spend with our family or anything else. And a person needs to be happy when they have these opportunities and things like that. So if the person is happy at their work, that's the best thing which you can get. And if they're happy, then no matter money or things like that, they'll always try to stick with your company.
Yes, I could not agree more. Another question in the Q&A, when you raise funds as a student, you go to the 3 Fs, friends, families, and fools. So when do you know when you can go beyond that and speak to external investors and VCs?
I think so. Once you build enough trust in, like, so for example, you feel like you have something which is good, and like, okay, you've collected feedback and you've been getting traction and things like that. That's when I think so. You're like, the external investors play the maximum role, because with friends and family, like they trust you not because of the ideas and things like that. More, they trust you because they trust in you and the relationship that, hey, what you're doing is will be good and things like that. But also you usually try to be careful with that, and you don't want to burn those bridges also. You try to take some support which you can when the other industry is not ready to support you yet, because you don't have something tangible. You've not built a trust or something there, as sometimes you might not win MVP. But once you have something which is good enough and you feel it's getting traction, then I think so it's the best time to go and get some external validation and the external funding also. And because, yeah, you want to rely on your friends and family, but up to a certain extent, which is required. But you want to keep it open for them, like if they want to participate in the future rounds, but then not just rely on them. And it's not wrong to do friends and family. I recently came across a startup. The founder sold his company for multi-billion dollars, and he's doing a new startup, and he's raising from friends and family also.
Yeah.
And that person is raising right now, and his previous company was sold for multi-billion dollars. And that's a completely okay thing to do, and yeah, people do it.
Correct. And speaking of MVP, I have MVP to investors.
The tension of the people, like even if you create a product to 5 people, are those 5 people regularly using it? Because if they are, that means it's solving a problem which they have and it's adding value to their lives. Because that's the biggest thing which you can do. It's like when you build something, is it sticky? Like we all use WhatsApp or Gmail or any product because it's just like it adds value to our life and we depend on it. So that's definitely one of the biggest metrics across the industry, which is retention.
Correct. And I believe it depends on the startup itself. There is various metrics they can look into. So in terms of your retention rate, in terms of your churn rate, acquisition, and so on. So do research more into this. I think your name is Akshat. Depending and modulated, depending on your startup. I think we have some time for one last question. So can you share some examples of good company
culture? I think so.
culture?
You shared one very good example of what y'all did. It's just like, I think so company culture is just try to keep an open culture which has things like transparency, honest like feedback, honest conversations between the people. Because like, for example, what you see as a different from startups versus corporates is sometimes corporates might, things are not transparent, it's top down and things like that. Whereas in startup, everyone is an owner in the company in a way, and everyone is working towards the same goal. So everyone should feel that they are contributing and adding values, and that they are like just like part owner of the company and value everyone's feedback. Because if they're not valuable, why are they in the startup? Because startup, you're trying to keep a very controlled environment of people who are adding values. And because a startup, people treat it as a baby a lot of times. People say, so you only want people to be teaching your baby the ones you trust. So making sure like have a similar culture, keep it open, having people have ownership, and keep a transparent environment. You can probably also add like some things from your learnings.
That's beautifully said. Especially also, communication is key. So always, as a founder or a C-level board member, take some time, sit with your employees, with your interns, with your team members. Just chat with them, understand what is going in their life. It doesn't have to be about the startup, it doesn't have to be about work. And you guys never know, like it leaves a huge impact. Trust me. Take some time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes of your time, of your schedule. Sit with a certain person. How are you doing? How's your family? Would you like something to be changed? And throughout this conversation, one thing carries to another thing, and it will create a very cohesive, strong team vibes and culture in the startup itself. So I think we can just wrap it up now. We're on spot, on time. Thank you everyone for joining, and we really appreciate your interest. The questions were amazing. Thank you, Rishav. Thank you, Cicely. Cicely, would you like to add anything to conclude?
No, I think you guys did a perfect job, and you wrapped it up very well as well, Reem. Thank you so much. I think everything was so relevant, and I hope the students gathered as much as they could. And we'll share the recording as well to them so that whoever missed it can access this later, because it's so important to get information from the ground. Thank you so much, Rishav. Please go back to sleep. And thank you, Reem. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the platform.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.